So by now you know a good bit about the fact that I am an electrician and this is what I do for a living. I build things and I make things go boom. Hopefully not. You know about this job that I'm in now that I've been working in for 6 years. What I really haven't talked a lot about before has been my previous job, the first job that I got at the ripe old age of 19, which was working at a supermarket as a stock boy. I've said that I've done that before, but there were a variety of shenanigans which ensued as I was working for that company. First thing that we did the first day that I went to work there was we walked up and down the aisles with our manager, whom we'll call Will, I guess. We'll call him Will. He was a man who was about, 7'8" and weighed about 700 pounds. He was a chungus of a man, muscular as you could possibly imagine, and just absolutely huge. He looked like he would be the pro wrestler to end all pro wrestlers. He was a pretty nice guy. He was the kind of person who you would think he's mean just because of the way his face is built and just because of how he's built, but he's actually a really kind sort of guy. And we walked with Will up and down the aisles, and we examined things. I say we because there were a couple of people hired at the same time to fill this position, and they wanted to introduce us to the store all at the same time. So we looked at everything, looked at how everything was laid out, where the different products are in which different aisles, and so on and so forth. And the day progressed with us going to the back of the building and going into the evil secret stock room where nobody ever goes if they're not a customer, so you never know what they look like. And we went back there and we pulled the pallets off of one of the trucks that had brought in groceries, and so we started taking them to the aisles where they were to be stocked. And over the course of the next several weeks, I became accustomed to the store, and I became accustomed to working there, and I became aware of something called a case count, which is the measure of productivity by which the employees are held. And it is required that each employee, whenever stocking the shelves, reach a minimum of 50 cases of product put to the shelves per hour, meaning less than 1 case per minute. And that was a pretty low bar to set in hindsight. Obviously, for the first couple of weeks, nobody's going to be hitting 50 cases per hour because in order to reach that level of productivity, you have to have a good familiarity with where the products are located on the shelves within the aisle. And you have to basically pull the product, the case of products off of your cart, which you have laden with products. And you would look and see what it is, and then you remember where in the aisle that thing is located, whether it be cans of beans, you know where the cans of beans are located. So you go over there until you find the actual brand, as well as the barcode number on the tag on the shelf. And so you would just continue doing that until you had emptied your cart of all of the different products you needed to restock. And my first case count, if I remember right, was 18 per hour, which is obviously for a veteran of the industry really bad, but for somebody who was first starting out, it's average. I became extremely competitive because I realized how badly I was falling behind on the second day whenever a coworker who started the same day that I did was already breaking 30 cases an hour on a pretty complex aisle, the soup aisle, as a matter of fact, with all the different cans of soups, and the condiments were also on that aisle, mustard, ketchup, and mayonnaise. And I was still on one of the easier aisles, and I was putting up roughly 20 cases per hour. And so I became very committed to beating not just that person, but the store record, which was 108 cases per hour to the shelves. And over the course of several months, as I continued to work for the company very hard, and I was well liked by most of my coworkers, I became a bit of a madman with slinging the product on the shelf. I was still doing it very neatly. I wasn't putting it up there and then just throwing it haphazardly wherever it would land. I was putting it up there, meticulously. That's the word I'm looking for. I was putting it up there in a way that would still benefit the customer as they're trying to find their soup and they can't find it because it's over with the tires. But in time, I started to realize that caffeine is something way to go with trying to boost my speed and my productivity. So I started drinking energy drinks before I would get to work, and other people were like drinking Mountain Dew and taking maybe an energy shot if they're feeling especially frisky. But I was downing 1 to 2 cans of whatever energy drink I could get my hands on before the shift began. And so I was a bit of a bumbleball, as my mother would refer to a very energetic small child. I was an adult bumbleball. I was absolutely about to have a heart attack with how much caffeine I had in my system at the time. And I was very loud and obnoxious. And I believe that that is partially where my personality, as it is today, started to develop. But I would consume way too much caffeine before the shifts. My heart would be slamming inside my chest as I would then try to drink water to kind of calm it down. But it boosted my productivity. I set the store record and the regional record for the most cases put to the shelves in an hour on the most complicated aisle in the store, which was aisle 3, which had the soups and condiments. 138 cases per hour, meaning over 2 cases per minute. 1 case every 30 seconds, which for an aisle which is about as long as a semi-trailer, and you've got to run all the way up and down the aisle, stocking the shelves and not breaking anything and making sure you put things in just the right location and all that sort of thing. That was freaky how fast that was. And many people didn't believe it. My manager came over there, the assistant manager, Will, that I just talked about, came down there, and he inspected the aisles for a good 20 minutes before he believed that I had put up 138 cases in an hour. He thought that was absolutely psychotic, that I was able to achieve such levels of productivity. I told him exactly what I had done. Before the shift began, I had consumed 3 cans of Monster and 1 energy shot. That was on a Thursday, and we only worked Monday through Thursday, just like here. We only worked Monday through Thursday, and I did it specifically on the last day of the week because A, I wanted to set a record, and B, I knew that the crash off of those energy supplements that I would have to endure would be monumental and would likely lead to me sleeping for a very long time. And sure enough, that is the first time in my life I've ever slept over 14 hours, was after all that energy stuff got out of my system. The sun looks absolutely ridiculous. I need to stop leaning forward. But that was my introduction to working for the store. Really didn't know my coworkers very well. There was one particular coworker who irked me, and for several reasons. Number one, he was always late, and I viewed that as a symbol of inferiority and a characteristic of somebody who's just not as committed as I am, because I viewed myself as the apex employee because I'm producing so much, and I still consider myself an apex employee. I mean, I'm not looking down on people nearly as much as I used to, which is such a horrible thing to say. I'm not as conceited as I used to be. But we'll call him Tom. And Tom was always showing up late for work. And he was the kind of person who would show up with an attitude of, he's better than everybody else, especially me. And he wanted to rub it in my face that despite the fact that he was showing up late for work, he was taking extendedly long lunch breaks, and generally you'd find him sitting in the back room on his phone. He would still outproduce everyone. He was hell-bent on outproducing me, just to prove that he could stay employed despite the fact that he was doing all these things that would lead you to think he's a lazy employee. He was going to smash my record and smash my general day-to-day records that I would set. Excuse me as I wipe my nose and continue talking. He would outperform me and be a better employee than me without having to put in all of the effort that I did to maintain good attendance and whatnot. And I hated Tom for daring to think that he could challenge me. And for a while, our rivalry became so bitter that we actually actively tried to get each other fired. I will not go into the details of that, but suffice to say it was a venomous relationship that abruptly ended one day whenever he simply did not show up for work. And people were concerned about him, hoping that, he didn't have an accident somewhere or that he hadn't overslept or something to that effect. Because while he was always late, he never just completely stopped coming. He never completely missed a day without at least calling to say that he wouldn't be there. But he just completely disappeared. And since that day, I still don't know what happened to him. We never found out where he went. He simply vanished in the middle of a work week, and it was very confusing. But I mean, we went on. Life goes on. There was a period where our store was owned by a specific company, which was the holding company that supplied us with products and whatnot. And we went through a period of changing over where our company, the supermarket, was bought from the holding company which held us by a different holding company. And so we had to go through this big changeover where we would change out all of the products, all of the labeling, all of the advertising, all of the different colors in the store had to be changed because, each company has its own color aesthetic. Walmart is blue or white or whatever, and Kroger's kind of a brown or a yellow or something to that effect. Target is red and white. You get the idea. So we had to repaint the store different colors. It was a mad 2 weeks. For quite a while, we were going through a process wherein we had to hire a contractor to come in and help us with it all because there were only 30 of us working in the store and we were doing the work of 200 people. So they hired 200 people to come in temporarily to help us change over. It was the most people I've ever seen in that store at once, and it was a frenzy. If somebody had caught a cold, we would have all had the cold within less than an hour because of how closely and densely packed we were in that building. I don't know how we didn't violate some sort of fire code, but we did our business, and we got the store changed over. But during that period, I met a girl. We will call her Angela, for example. We'll call her Angela. Angela was the promiscuous sort, and this was the first time that I had encountered a girl who was very openly suggestive and very open about all the different relationships that she'd had with all different sorts of guys, and definitely flaunted her body count, which was, again, it was the first time I'd encountered a person like this, and it was rather off-putting at first. But she was very nice. She was about as tall as that traffic cone over there, and about as heavy, too. Hair about as long as she was tall, and she had the most makeup I've ever seen on a person. It was like if you slapped her in the face, you'd have to pull your hand back to get it unstuck from her face, and your hand would be twice as thick as it originally was. I mean, she loaded the makeup on. But met her, and she was, again, very, very open about her behavior and her ways. And she was not afraid to put her hands on you, which was threatening to me because I grew up mostly, I don't want to say touch-starved, because that's extreme, but like everybody in our family and most of my friend group, we kept our hands to ourselves. Like, we did not touch each other unnecessarily because that's just rude. That's an invasion of privacy and personal space. She was not that kind of person. Apparently she was raised in a barn because she acted like a barn animal with the way that she would just violate personal space rather aggressively. She was fired very briefly very quickly after the changing over process was finished because of her behavior, causing a bit of a disturbance in the workforce. But I do remember specifically one day, and this is the one day that I remember from the changeover process specifically because two major things happened. Number one, I was standing in line because as employees, we still have to buy things from the store. So I was buying lunch, and there were no customers in the store. But one of the managers activated a cash register because it was time for lunch. And so I grabbed myself something from the freezer, and I grabbed a drink, and I went to the checkout line. And whatever this girl's name was, I just gave her a name to hide her real name. Angela is what I called her. Angela was standing in line in front of me. And she turned around and she saw me and she said, "Hey, Rain." And I said, "How you doing, Angela? You getting you a sandwich? That's convenient. It's lunchtime and all that." I was just trying to, respond to her, but then stop talking as quickly as I could. And she backed up to me and rubbed her ass up against me. And I backed up and I turned around and I was about to just go put my stuff back because that upset me so much. And honestly, in hindsight, it shouldn't really have upset me that much. But the man standing in line behind me was I won't even bother giving him a name. He was just a dude that I knew that was also doing the same job I was doing. He said, "What you doing, man? Come on, it's free." And I remember distinctly looking up 7 or 8 feet in the air at his face and saying, "My good sir, nothing in life is free." And then I went like 2 spots behind him in line. And it was just, it's hilarious in hindsight to hear me saying that, "My good sir, nothing in life is free," knowing that I grew up in the South down here in Georgia. And I tell you something, Bo, we don't talk like all that now, all that fancy talk, talking about "my good sir." Like, what about "my bad sir"? Would you call somebody a bad sir? It was funny to me. That was one thing that happened that day. And I never talked to that girl again after that, and she wound up getting fired. But the next thing that happened that day was later on, and this kind of just contradicted everything that I said, because I said that I mostly kept to myself, but I want to bet. And so that's what motivated me to violate my own privacy and my personal space. I was about to leave because the end of the workday was upon us, and I walked over to the assistant manager to tell him goodbye because I'd just clocked out. And that was something I always did, and that's something I still do, is whenever I'm about to leave, I tell whoever the boss is to have a good day and I'll see you tomorrow and all this sort of thing. Because I just feel like it's the neighborly thing to do. And so I walked up to the assistant manager, who was standing next to the manager, and I told them, "Y'all have a good day, I'll see y'all tomorrow." And they both nodded and said goodbye, and I looked at the assistant manager in a jovial sort of mood, and I said, "Do I get a hug goodbye, Will?" And Will looked at me with this flabbergasted expression and said, "No, you do not get a hug goodbye. What are you talking about?" If I hugged you, I'd have to get down on my knees just to reach you. And I said, "Okay, yeah, all right, well, fine then. I know that I could get a hug from Bob back there. I'll go hug Bob instead." Now, Bob was the name of the janitor. It's not actually his name. I just made that up. But the janitor, we'll call him Bob, was standing behind me. Bob was an old man. At the time, he was in roughly his late 60s, early 70s. He was one of the nicest guys you'd ever meet. And he was an old man, and he had an old man's ways. He was set in his ways of doing things just the way he'd always done them, which one of the ways that he had was to take a bath once a week. And that garnered the side effects that one would expect from doing so. Again, nothing against Bob. He wasn't a dirty man. He was a very nice man. He was a good guy, and he passed away not too long ago. But he was not known for exactly being a huggable type of guy. But I was simply continuing to joke with Will, the assistant manager, about that, and he said, "Rain, if you go over there and hug Bob right now, I will give you my paycheck. I'll sign it over to you." And I looked at Will and I said, "You promise me?" He said, "You want to shake on it?" I shook his hand. And his expression of sneering and internally laughing at my demise turned to one of shock and horror as I turned around and I walked over to where Bob was standing, leaning up on a shelf, not really paying attention to anything, minding his own business, off in thought, and I walked up to him and I threw out my arms and I said, "Goodbye, Bob," and I wrapped him up. One of the biggest and most prolonged hugs I've ever given to another person. And I felt him go limp in my arms. He was livid that I had walked over and hugged him thusly, harassed even by my behavior. And I heard the manager, whom I haven't named, the manager standing back behind me, laughing his fool ass off at the situation unfolding. And Bob stiffened up as he realized that the manager was laughing, and I let go of him at that point, backed away, and he pointed at the manager and said, "I knew you were behind this." And he thought it was funny at that point too, because he thought it was all for jokes, and I just wasn't actually just walking up to him and assaulting him in the middle of the store. It was all in fun. In hindsight, it was extremely cringy and creepy, and I shouldn't have done that to the poor guy. But regardless, I was looking for money. And I looked at that assistant manager. His head was as the lowest I've ever seen it. He was appalled that he had lost his paycheck in this manner. And I swaggered over there to Will and looked up at him, and I said, "Where's that money?" And he said, "Rain, I underestimated you, I must admit. I didn't know you were that crazy or that stupid. And so for that reason, I beg your mercy and hope that you'll accept a different gift." And I said, "Okay, what did you have in mind? A hug, perchance?" And he said, "No, absolutely not. You want me to be cross-contaminated by you going over there and hugging Bob? Absolutely not. I will, however, buy you a $20 lottery ticket." And I said, "Okay, all right." I was already known to be a bit of a lottery player at the time, and that's another story for another video, which is definitely something I'm going to talk about later on. But suffice it to say, the man walked over to the cash register and bought me a $20 lottery ticket, on which I won $150, and he was very upset. So that was my first year working for the company. I only worked there 2 years. And for the rest of the time there, nothing really happened major. We had some people come and go, and I met some good friends, and none of whom I still keep up with, save for one. But the two major things that happened during my second year there were that I picked up skateboarding. I'd never ridden a skateboard in my life, but my uncle had a longboard that he kept in his his bedroom for some reason, and I don't know why you'd be skateboarding in the house, but I say that, and somehow I'm going to try and figure out a way to justify the fact that I would skateboard inside the store. I remember we were working inside the store whenever no customers are actually in there. We would always wait until it was nighttime, and we would lock the building, and the alarm system would arm so that if we tried to go outside and like open the doors or something to that effect, the alarm would go off and the police would be called, and there would be a big snafu, and we never opened the doors without disarming the alarm. Now, again, I said that I started skateboarding, and that's not quite as relevant as the fact that we did arm the alarms overnight. And that meant we couldn't go anywhere. It also meant that we couldn't touch the doors or the windows because they have sensors in them which are designed to detect whenever the glass of the windows is broken and call the police that way and sound the alarm that way. There is a window in that break room of the building. It is the only actual proper window in the entire building that is not somehow attached to the doors. And it's just people who are sitting in the break room can look out while they're eating lunch and admire all of the traffic stopped on the highway outside, or look at the old woman pushing her cart through the parking lot and leaving it in the middle of the lane of traffic. That window had a sensor in it as well to detect glass breaking. That sensor would detect a lot more than just glass breaking, as I discovered one evening whenever I went to one of the cash registers where the microphone stalks are for the employees who are standing at the cash registers to call out for assistance on whatever register it is that they are, or to announce some sort of marvelous sale that they're having, or just it's a announcement thing that they have. And all my coworkers were out there working. I had just come back from the bathroom and was about to go back to work whenever I had a sneaky idea. I walked over to the microphone, and I pulled that microphone down, and I burped just as loudly as I could into that microphone, thinking it was comedic genius for everybody to be minding their own business and doing their jobs, when all of a sudden a big old belch is heard over the radio. And it was funny for about half of a second before the alarm for the building went off and the burglar alarm was sounded and the police were called immediately by the system. Apparently my burp was so loud, so violent, that the sound waves were enough to rattle the break room window enough that it triggered the glass break sensor. The police confirmed whenever they arrived that sure enough they got a call from that building through the automatic system saying that the break room window had been broken. And they arrived, and the break room window's fine, and I admitted to them that I had burped loud enough to set off the alarm, and they all had a nice laugh. I did not, however. It was the most humiliating experience. It wasn't the most humiliating experience of my life, but it was really, really embarrassing. And the police drove away, and my manager shook her head as she walked back into the building, and I walked in there too, and she looked at me, this side-eyed expression, and laughed her ass off about this, and then wrote me up for it, because I had triggered a false alarm. And apparently the company was fined $10,000 every time that the alarm was put off falsely. So, yay for me, and yay for my company. But anyhow, that was the fun goings on there for the second year. I know that I said that there were two things major that happened in the second year. Oh, I just remembered what the other one was. Yeah, I was talking yesterday about porn and how that's something that I have always watched since I was too young to really be safely able to understand what sex was. And that was in full swing whenever I was at the age of 19 and 20 working for this store. And I was fascinated by a variety of different genres of NSFW content. And I didn't even at the time know what NSFW meant, as I'd never heard the term not safe for work. I had no conceptualization of what NSFW was, or the fact that it's not okay to use the manager's computer to look up porn while on lunch break. Because I certainly did. Psychotic, one might think. That's absolutely ridiculous. Why the fuck would you do that? I did it because I didn't know any better. Because I'd always had a personal computer at the house and a phone where I can look up these different things that I thought were so funny. And I'd always had SD cards available for me to download the things that I found most genius. And not having any cell phone reception inside of this big old store and not having access to my computer left me with one option: look it up on the manager's computer, because that's the only computer in the building that can access the internet. And so I went and I did that on lunch break. And the manager wasn't there, so he wasn't using the computer. It's not like I would be interrupting the natural, procedures that he was undergoing. And things went fine for about 4 or 5 days. I was, laughing my ass off on lunch, watching whatever it was I thought was funny on Pornhub or whatever website I was looking at. And one day, my manager and I were leaning up in the back room and talking about things, and talking about, the different things that we needed to get stocked today, and we have a shortage of this, and by the way, we need labels changed on this aisle. And he eventually stopped talking and said, "By the way, Rain, I'm not mad at you. Don't take this the wrong way. I'm not upset with you. I want you to stop looking up porn on my computer, please." And it flabbergasted me to no end. It was extremely embarrassing. I know that I turned about as red as a beet because I didn't know that he knew. I didn't know there was a way for him to find out. I was deleting the internet files, the history, the cookies, all that sort of thing. And he said, "I understand, you're a growing boy." And it got to a point in the conversation where he started to become more cringy than anything I've ever heard. And he didn't introduce religion or any of that kind of shit in it. Like, porn is against God's will. I need to get born again to see the kingdom of God and all that kind of stuff. But he was just upset that I was using his computer for that because of it looking bad on him, because of people in management over him thinking that he's using the computer to look up porn. So he admonished me about that and just asked me to please look that up on your phone or whatever, just not on my computer. And I said, "Yes, sir." I wanted to say so much more. I wanted to fall on my knees and apologize to him because it was the most embarrassing thing that happened the entire time I was working there. But I didn't. I could barely choke out the words, "Yes, sir." But I did. And I never heard anything else about it. And I worked for several months after that before I quit to come work here. So that is my history with that, and how I learned what NSFW stands for. One of the most catastrophic ways a person can learn what that means. Like, it wasn't that I was concerned about my coworkers seeing that I was watching porn. I wouldn't have had an issue with them coming and looking at it too, but I was under the impression that the manager was a Christian man and that he would be offended by it. And I wasn't trying to, I wasn't trying to upset him because I liked the man and respected the man, and I still do, but I just didn't want to upset him with it. And so that's what embarrassed me more. And thankfully, he wasn't as upset about it as I figured he would be, being a God-fearing man. But with that being said, it is time for me to go back to work. This is twice as long of a video as I typically make because there was a lot of ground to cover, and I don't feel like I covered it at all very eloquently or straightforwardly. I think it was probably very confusing, but you get the gist of the situation. I worked there for 2 years, and I was a bumbleball, as my mother very wisely once put it. And yeah, that was fun. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being able to work there and do the things that I did, even though sometimes it was a bit too much for my taste.